denying that there is a God, I guess. All right, so God is kind of that timeless, unchanging order personified. So if you deny that there is a God, I guess in a way you deny the archetypal existence of a perfect being, and without the existence of a perfect being, moving in the world becomes harder because there is no value that you have to walk towards in a way. You know what I mean? And on a moral level, Christians have that perfection to walk towards. I mean, they're walking towards becoming closer. They're walking towards God. They're never going to reach it, at least not in this lifetime. But at least that value to pursue, like there's a value to pursue. And in these cities, that value was absent. So there's a lot of talk about utopia and his belief in like socialism and communism. There's a lack of morals, like you said. Since there's no morals to go off of, they kind of have to start from scratch.
They were telling us about our white privilege, and I was the first one to stand up, raise my hand, and say, actually, I have black family as well, and they don't believe that. And my dad, who's white, grew up poor. He worked hard and he got a little lucky too, and now he's at the place he's at. And trying to explain to not only the rest of the class but my teacher about how that's just not true. Then I go home with my sister and walking to the bus stop, and one kid that was in the same class as I was said that I was defending white supremacy. So that was the first time I got to see not only um, how schools were becoming these indoctrination centers, but also how the students were being turned into some of the aggressors against people with different opinions.
At first, our public schools were not even doing us any favor, but not really accurately teaching us the Western canon. A lot of people went through school without knowing what makes America so great. What are the underlying philosophical gears that are running and uh fueling one of the greatest countries alive. So in the first place, we weren't learning anything about true Western philosophy, or and I'm not even just talking about John Locke or John Locke and people like that, but I'm talking about way back to like classical Greece, where the classical Greek period, where we had Heraclitus with the Logos, with Pythagoras, right? The Pythagorean theorem. We don't learn about these people. We don't really learn much about Aristotle, about Socrates. So and we still have the Socratic method, but people don't really know much about Socrates. So we aren't even taught the Western canon in the first place. And now on top of that, we have an ongoing indoctrination that actively uh tells us critique our to critique Western civilization without merit, right? Critical theory in general, seek to critique, and they don't care whether that criticism is maintained by empirical methods. I've seen with critical theory the way it's been spread is in bits and pieces. So one day it would be about deconstruction, and the students would agree with it. And then the next day it would be about let's say something else. Let's say like justice, and what is justice? Is there racial justice, or do we treat everybody equally? And then students would disagree with the indoctrinator at that point and would say, no, true justice is treating everybody in a colorblind society. And it kind of goes like that. So ultimately, when the students are graduating, they have accepted some ideas of critical theory like deconstruction, and rejected some ideas of critical theory like true justice and uh meritocracy and hard work and stuff like that. But ultimately, by the time they go to college, they're one step in and one step out, which is easier for the professors who are the true ideologues, like the ideologues in a professional league in a way. Well, the first thing one of the things you talked about was, the evil white male, and there's a growing conversation in the United States about critical race theory, which is, personally I believe that, or personally I'm frankly annoyed by the right in a sense for simply zeroing in on critical race theory, because critical race theory is a school of criticism within a huger branch of philosophical thinking that we call critical theory, which may not necessarily be simply about race. It can be about gender. There's critical gender theory, there's queer theory, there's deconstructionism, deconstruction by Derrida and Foucault. So this does not end at critical race theory, but for the purposes of exploring this evil white male, why liberals believe that there's an evil white male. Can you explain to us what is this critical race theory? What do you believe? What do you believe constitutes as critical race theory?
Yeah, so critical race theory, again, you said it's part of critical theory, and it's all inclusive. And so I work in education, and essentially what we do is they send you to these training seminars where they tell you that you have what's called implicit bias, and they tell you that it's not good or bad, but you need to be aware of it. And then they kind of slide in that your implicit bias is actually bad. So they'll tell you, oh, you might prefer male students, or you might prefer female students, but you should treat them all equally.
But also with your friends, if you don't show respect to your friends, you're gonna lose your friends. But that does not mean you have to give yourself or give your personal. You have to separate your person, or give away your personal will, your individual will, so you can maintain those friends. And I think that is something that many people, especially teenagers, because teenagers are hyper, they're hypersensitive to their hierarchy, to their triangle, not to the triangle, to their circle, right? I was thinking of a hierarchy there, so I said triangle, but they're hypersensitive to their circles. And so they're really, they do not want to lose their friends, because when you're in your teenage years, your friends are everything, right? I'm not gonna lie about that. When you're in your teenage years, your friends are everything. And so what we see is people kind of taking advantage of that, especially in teenage circles, where they say, we want to do something that may not be healthy for you, or may not be good for you, and it's not good for you. Your will is telling you no, right? You're exerting your human ability to question, right? And you're saying, what is that thing that my friend group is the thing that my friend group want me to do? Is that good? No, right? And acting on the answer of that question you ask yourself is conducive to becoming the best individual you become. People lack that second step. They're unable to act on the second step because they're hypersensitive to their friend group, and they think that, hey, if I don't say, they think to themselves, hey, if I don't say yes to Stephanie, then I'm gonna lose her as a friend. Things. If you are unable to keep your individual identity, your individual will with your friend group, how are you expected to do that in the greater society? When society is telling you something that you probably shouldn't do. Maybe it's stone your neighbor because, I don't know, they said something that your community don't want you to, your community doesn't want your neighbor to say. How are you, if you're unable to say no to the people you know best, how are you able to say no to the people you may not know as well? This is extremely important, especially for young people today. So people like Chris, Nehemiah, right? You guys should listen, especially Christelle, right? You guys use social media, right? So this is extremely important for you guys, right? Why the comparison, right? So Luke chapter 12, verse 22 to 34. And let me read you Luke chapter 12, verse 22 to 34. Concentrate on your relationship with God, right? Concentrate on your improvement. You do not need to compare yourself with somebody else. You do not need to compare yourself with the president of the United States. You do not need to compare yourself with the CEO of a company. Compare yourself to what you were yesterday? Did you do the habits that you told yourself you were going to do yesterday and continue to push on that? You don't need to compare yourself. Work on yourself. Work on your relationship with God, and all the things that you will need will come to you. It will come naturally, right? It will come naturally, and that's self-explanatory. Now, a lot of people today, right? A lot of people today, especially younger people, do not realize that, right? And with the establishment of social media, they're constantly comparing themselves to other people. Whether it be another girl who may look prettier than you, whether it be somebody who's driving a Lamborghini on Instagram, or seeing your friends hanging out somewhere cool in on Snapchat, right? They're constantly comparing yourself, right?